Hey Spookies, I'm Steve Emont. So I did a comic book in the mid-2000s called Emo Boy. It lasted for a few years. I did that with SLG Publishing, was collected in 2 volumes. And a couple years ago, I decided to try and bring it back as a webtoon. I did 10 episodes of the webtoon, which was doing pretty well before I stopped. So why did I stop? I want to talk today about abandoned projects, about quitter's remorse, about asking that what if I kept going. I want to talk a bit about why I stopped and what the plans were and what it would have been and could be. Stay tuned. Alright, so why did I stop the Emo Boy webtoon? I mean, first off, why stop anything? There's lots of excuses, there's lots of reasons. I've had project burnout, I've had issues trying to gather interest or an audience for projects. I've had pitches that were rejected. In the case of Emo Boy, the quick answer is I stopped after my mom passed away. This was in 2022. She passed away from cancer. I had intended to take a small break. I got interested in other ideas and I kind of shelved it. But I do have some degree of quitter's remorse. I do have those questions of what if I picked it back up? What if I kept going? It's a project that I really liked. I had tried several times to pitch the idea of doing more Emo Boy. It was my first major published work. Deserves its own video, but for now the super quick version, he's an emo kid. He has emo superpowers, very Carrie-like, destructive, bad powers that don't do any good, makes him more emo. It was an indie comic, kind of comedy comic that ran in the mid-2000s, and I always thought it'd be fun to go back and revisit. It was something that I had a lot of fun creating. I felt very fulfilled creatively. I didn't know a lot about writing. Since then, I've written screenplays and books and stuff. I've done a lot of studying on story structure and all that. What I wrote for Emo Boy initially was essentially inspired by growing up watching TV. It's like I know what a story is. I know how this is supposed to go. And something about that concept, I was able to create a lot of ideas and stories out of it that to this day I still think are really funny. So I always did want to kind of revisit that. Talking about that, what if I hadn't stopped? What if I hadn't gotten distracted? I have done this before where I think a lot about the overall world, where I want to go, structure these things out into acts and volumes and years, and eventually it's going to go here. And, sometimes you start that out and you just run out of steam right off the bat, or for whatever reason the project stops. Nobody gets to see the grand ideas. So part of what inspired this video was a talk that I did 2015, 2016. This was at Unicorn Writers Conference. It was at a castle. It was at a big castle, and I was asked to come do a speech on using art in books, which is something I've done in all my young adult novels. They always involve art in some way. What I ended up giving was nothing like that. I wanted to, so I spoke to these students and writers about how I was going to incorporate art in a bunch of things that never saw light of day. Things that I pitched to my editor or to my agent, and for whatever reason, never happened. And a lot of people were inspired by it. They were like, oh my God, that's such a cool idea. I wish I could have seen that. I wish you could still do that. Try it again. And it was encouraging actually to be like, okay, so these weren't just a bunch of terrible ideas. People do find this interesting. They just didn't happen for some reason. So for once I want to say, here's what my idea was. Here's the Emo Boy webtoon experience. Here's what it would have been had I not stopped. Maybe someday I'll pick it back up or find some other way to tell the story. But for now, it's shelved. And I'm gonna spill on what it was. So when I decided to do it as a webtoon, I'd done webtoons before. I had done webcomics before. I did something called Have Heart, which was a horror webcomic that was drawn as kind of a traditional page by page. It was painted and it was weird, but it was, comic book pages. And when I put that on webtoon, I just kind of stacked the comic book pages. Then I did something called No Sleep for Violet Gray. And that was something that I started to actually think about what webtoon is supposed to be. The vertical scrolling, the pacing of it. I wanted to design it as episodes for a webtoon. That I stopped doing for other reasons. Emo Boy I wanted to reinvent because Emo Boy had been done by myself. It had its life. If I was going to bring it back, I wanted to find a way to modernize it. And webtoon seemed like a good fit. Webtoon's cool because it has its own little audience, big audience, I guess I should say. So people congregate there, they find things. And at one point, Emo Boy was kind of featured on their main page. It was the one real good audience jump in those 10 episodes, those 10 weeks that I was posting. So it's kind of cool to know when you're updating, if Senpai Webtoon notices me, they're going to show it to the larger world and you can gain some actual audience that way. So there are different ways I went about modernizing Emo Boy. In the original comic, he was a very kind of goofy looking kid. He had this giant nose and these buck teeth, and for whatever reason that was my image of emo at the time. So I decided first off I was going to make him this devastatingly handsome guy. He was still going to be misunderstood by the world at large, and he was going to be very in himself, but he was going to be this super attractive person as well. So that was a major change. Doing the vertical, of course, is a major change. And one of the things that I was super inspired by at the time is I had been reading a manga called Chainsaw Man, which is a very popular manga. You may have read it yourself. Chainsaw Man is just pure insanity. Everything about it is just very weird, and it's just very gleeful in being a manga and being comics. I was very inspired by that. I wanted to have it be something where you read it and go, wow, what the hell did I just read? That's wow, that's crazy. I wanted to throw just crazy, weird ideas. And I was so inspired by Chainsaw Man and manga that I decided that rather than being this kind of TV episodic comedy where every episode Emo Boy has some kind of weird power thing to make himself more hated and unpopular, I wanted to actually kind of think of it as a battle manga, which is weird. It's a very completely different take, but that's kind of what got me excited about it. Maybe at some point I'll do a separate video on this, but I had read a book called the Royal Road to Manga by the creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And it talks a lot about that kind of shonen manga style, that Dragon Ball style thing where you're constantly fighting an intense enemy, and it takes all your skills and everything you have to defeat this enemy, and then that enemy kind of becomes a side character or part of your party, if you want to go in RPG terms, and you're constantly moving the story forward to an even bigger enemy and an even bigger enemy, which obviously for something like Emo Boy, it doesn't make a ton of sense, but when I was restructuring the story, I kind of came up with these different steps as to how that could happen. So I devised these different arcs, each one with its own kind of enemy, like a mid-boss and a main boss. And each arc has its own variation on a theme of Emo Boy is just somebody who wants to write one great song. That's kind of how it starts. That was going to be the first line, is all I want is to write one great song. In the first volume, it was so he could connect with people. And it would start with Penny, who is Emo Boy's big crush, his love, kind of scouts Emo Boy for his songwriting talents, and she wants him to join the band that she's in. So she's a singer in a band. And the first volume was going to involve Emo Boy joining this band. His first rival was going to be this guy Ragamuffin, who's the current songwriter for the band. Just another beautiful boy. So it's going to be these two beautiful boys kind of. He doesn't want Emo Boy. Emo Boy doesn't trust this guy. And eventually they were just going to clash. And so one of the problems that I had was, how does he clash with somebody? They're not going to be fighting like Dragon Ball. So I had to come up with some kind of power, some way for them to duel. So Ragamuffin is so in tune with his guitar. He's a guitarist, and he's so in tune with it he can communicate with it. And the guitar is going to actually like talk. So the guitar is going to have all these witty comments and talk about things. And when he would play the guitar, it would could actually cut people. The music was so pure and pristine it would slice you. Emo Boy's power was going to be his lyrics, his songwriting. And so one of the things in Emo Boy was these monologues that he would always have. And there were these kind of ranting, poetic, long, song lyric monologues. So the idea is that he would create these metaphors, and there'd be this kind of trippy, hallucinogenic thing where these metaphors would actually happen. He would actually battle people through his lyrics. So in the first volume, they're kind of testing him out for, can he be part of this band? There's this girl, Fei Fei, who takes the role of Jenny in the original comic. The first main thing that happens in the original comic is Emo Boy kisses Jenny and her head explodes. That's the first time we see his powers. So her head explodes, everybody's angry, they're ready to kill him, but he's so inspired that he comes up with a song called Jenny's Dead, and they win a talent show off of it. That's the first issue of the original Emo Boy. So in this version, she kisses Emo Boy, her head explodes, and then Ragamuffin sees him, and he's like, I knew you were no good, this ends now. And that's when they get into the first major battle in this mall. Battle ends when Fei Fei comes back as a zombie, and she was gonna have some kind of grunting growl type thing as part of the band. I forget that part. There was another part of the story involving a teacher, this substitute teacher that's inspiring Emo Boy to write his lyrics and go to these dark places. And he was kind of inspired by John Keats and Ode to a Nightingale. And so there's going to be all these metaphors of nightingales and this darkness that he's embracing. And after the big battle, Ragamuffin respects his talents, and they become a songwriting duo, and they team up to face a gigantic evil nightingale, as you will. And that's the first volume. Second volume was going to involve a battle of the bands tournament. So this involved two things. It involved actual battles on stage with all these other bands, so that kind of lent itself for more enemies for them to face. And then there was this subplot of them kind of finding these creatures that they were nourishing, but as the band starts to fall apart and fight, they turned kind of evil and chaotic, and at their show they were going to destroy all these animals or something. So that was the second arc, was the Battle of the Bands. The third arc involved being spotted by Emo Boy's favorite indie artist, Sorrow Eyes, I think, or Sorrow Lee, I think was his name. So he was going to be the third major arc. Sorrow was one of the judges at the tournament, and he's interested in what Emo Boy can do, trying to consider signing him to his label. So Sorrow also is trying to write the one great perfect emo song, and he almost kind of views Emo Boy as competition and thinks if I can get him under my wing, I can control what he creates and what's released. Ultimately, Emo Boy would have to battle Sorrow and Sorrow's fans. He has a bunch of rabid fans that are maniacal and try to kill him as well, as you do. So eventually Emo Boy and the band would sign to Sorrow's label, and then it was going to open up into the Great Label Wars, and I was going to have all these different, like, this bad analogy now, but this Puff Daddy like figure and his crew. There's going to be this kind of death row label, there was going to be this country label, a K-pop label, and they're all at war with each other, trying to control people through music or something like that. And so the fourth arc was going to involve everybody trying to get rid of Emo Boy or trying to sign him over to their labels. So basically that's about as far as I had crafted this story, from Emo Boy trying to write a song, to writing a song to connect to people, to writing a song to win a tournament, to writing a song to get signed to a label, to writing a song to like heal the world or whatever. Like, I had this grand arc envisioned, this very Chainsaw Man-esque thing that would go in these stages and volumes. Obviously, none of that happened. I think I got as far as Emo Boy meeting Ragamuffin and they didn't like each other. That's about as far as I got. So a lot of times it's planning so far out. Like, that's kind of the fun part for me, or one of the more fun parts is just letting your brain go, just coming up with all kinds of crazy ideas and seeing how far it'll go. And then it actually gets down to, okay, now every week I got to actually write, draw, color. It's a lot of work doing a webtoon, and this one was actually going pretty good, and I was pretty excited about it until tragedy struck. Once that happened, I took some time off, and for whatever reason, when I was ready to start creating again, I decided to go with John Died on a Monday. I thought it was something different and cartoony and would be fun to do, something a little bit easier I was trying to do. I ended up making it way harder than it needed to be. But yeah, a lot of my ideas, No Sleep for Violet Grey would be another one, Have Heart was another one. I have these, these full stories, these chapters and volumes, and these entire worlds created in my head, things that I get really excited about. Like, I was super excited to do the battle scene, to do the giant evil nightingale, to do the concerts and the tournament, to write like lyrics for the songs and everything. Like, you have this vision that people are gonna like hop on board and they're all gonna be excited, and it's like, oh, I can't wait until they see this, can't wait till I get that idea out there. But more often than not, they just stay up here, and I don't even really get to show anybody the really fun stuff I was super looking forward to. So it's kind of cathartic and fun to do a video like this, just talk about what could have been had I not quit. But if it's something that you'd like to see, I could always be persuaded. Just leave some comments below. But like, comment, subscribe, and have you had to drop off things that you think about to this day, let me know. I'd like to hear about it. Till next time, everybody, stay spooky.